Hello everybody. So, we start this video off when Izuku was born. Up in northern Japan with their mother, who had black hair and was most of the time depicted as a busy woman, and they were quite wealthy also. And Ishuka was born along with her two sisters. There were triplets, and they were Rei as the Moltres and Sai as Zapdos. And all of them are female, by the way. Just feels right. Anyway, Ishuka grew up with her family, and they were very happy. Their father, though, he was as busy as their mother were. He was barely ever around. At least their mother arrived every day to them, but their father was basically never there. And one day when Ishuka was growing up, she was 2 at the time, their mother came into the room sobbing and says, "Ishuka, your father's going on a trip. It'll be a while before he's back. Maybe, sometime, okay? Maybe when we reach, when we get $1 trillion, our father will come back, okay?" As Ishuka's like, "We're gonna be rich." As her mother just cries a single tear and says, "Yeah." Secretly, guys, their father had died in a car accident that same day. So, that's interesting way to start this what if off. And Ishuka grew up with their single mother, and they were all very happy. Their mother always tried to put just nothing around their father. They completely blocked the thought out, and she made sure of that. Kind of like Shigaraki with his father in the manga. Their father blocked out the thought of being heroes ever. He even abused Tenko for it, and yeah, he just downright hated it. So, their mother was in just total denial, so they never brought this subject up. And Ishuka, who one day, when she was around 4 years old, she was playing in the snow with her friends. And when one of her friends shows her quirk, and it's her arm that extends very long, kind of like Luffy or Luffy. I don't know how you say it. Anyway, Ishuka is like, "Oh, I wonder if I have that." As she tries to extend her arm, but instead of that, 2 ice shards come out of it and shoot out the kid. As the student quickly gets out of the way, as Ishuka's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know I could do that." As they're like, "Oh, no, it's fine, Ishuka." As Ishuka looks at her hands like, "I have an ice quirk." As Ishuka also feels something on her back and says, "Oh, what's that?" This horrible pain. As she looks to her back to see some very light blue wings. Kind of like a very, very light sky blue. And yeah, Ishuka's like, "Oh, this looks so cool." As she also has this little cool tail, just like the picture you're seeing right now. Anyway, Ishuka showed this to their mother, and their mother was very happy about this, and took all 3 of them to the quirk doctor, where the quirk doctor examined them, and their quirks were found out. Ishuka had an ice quirk. And Ishuka, deciding the name was like, what sounds good for ice? Arctic. As she says, since I'm the best child, as she says, Articuno. And like Arctic and then Uno, like one. So, Articuno. As the doctor's like, oh, that's a pretty cool name. As he types it into the computer. As who's it called? Ray says, what should I name mine? As Ishuka's like, I know, since you're the worst of us. As she's like, hey. As Ishuka's like, wait. As she says, molten like fire. And then Trace, since I just called you 3. And yeah, Trace. As Ray's like, yeah, that name kind of does sound cool. As Ray tells that to the doctor, yeah. And then Sai gets the same treatment like Zap. Like lightning and then dose for like the middle. And that was like in the order of which they came out of their mom. So Ishuka came out first, and obviously we don't talk about how Ishuka remembers that. That is some insane gigabrain memory. Anyway, Ishuka, growing up along their family, for the next couple of years, they go through the school system and, normal stuff, as you'd imagine. As we go all the way to middle school days. And at this time, their mother had gotten a boyfriend. And he was a very important businessman. He was kind of like a political figure, a celebrity. And Ishuka was very happy about this because now they lived in a big mansion instead of the smaller mansion. And Ishuka was so happy about this because she even had her room painted blue like she always wanted it. And yeah, she really much enjoyed this. But their father, just like their old one, wasn't there much. But when he was, they loved him. He was so nice and kind to them. So yeah. Anyway, Ishuka, in middle school, had become a very popular kid, being the stronger of the 3 siblings. Obviously, ice containing electricity, and Sai being a little dumber than Ishuka. And Ishuka, through just grit and grind, somehow being able to beat Ray. Ray is the second strongest, though. Sai is third. That's the power rankings. And Ishuka, now, on the last day of middle school, she's walking home with her siblings and says, oh, guys, look, it's a kid. As they quickly go over to the child, as the kid says, oh, hi, I'm lost. Can you help me? As all 3 of them kneel down to help her get up, as the girl says, yes, as someone jumps out from behind them. As Ishuka looks behind, she's kicked into the back of the alley. As the man says, that was too easy, little bro. As the younger brother gets up and says, you won't defeat us. As the guy quickly materializes his hand into a very sharp metal claw, as he leaps at Ray and Sai, as Ishuka throws them out of the way and tries to freeze the metal claw, but it for some reason had a heater on, just in case of an ice quirk, and her attacks do nothing, as she's scratched on the eye with the entire metal claw, and then kicked back down into the back of the alley as Ishuka's like, ow, as she falls onto the ground. As Rei's like, Ishuka, how dare you? And Rei then starts materializing a massive fireball and says, take this, as she blows a massive fireball at the two brothers, and they quickly dodge and climb up the wall. As Ishuka then freezes both of their legs as they fall onto the ground, and it hurts them a lot. And Ishuka's like, all three of us, come on, as they both jump into the air, as Ishuka freezes the two brothers once again. And Ishuka says, elemental burst, as all three of them charge up and attack next to each other, and it sends one massive ball of energy flaring towards the two brothers, as the bigger brother obviously shields the younger one and takes the blunt of the blast. As Ishuka's like, that must have made a pretty loud noise, as Rei's like, I think we got them, as the bigger brother is like, ow, as he falls onto the ground, and the younger brother quickly gets to his side and says, are you okay? As Ishuka's like, not after this, he won't be. As Ishuka, with her partially blind eye, says, you'll pay for that. As she kicks the younger brother into the wall, says, it didn't have to be this way, but you attacked first. As she starts freezing the guy completely, as he can only lay there motionless on the floor, and just says, please, just let him go. I don't care what you do to me. As the younger brother quickly runs back off to where they had been living. As Ishuka, feeling bad, like, fine, just don't do anything like this again. As she releases the ice and lets him go. As Ishuka is like, are you guys good? As Sai is like, that took so much energy. As Ishuka's like, did it? It didn't to me. As Rei's like, show off. And yeah, that's how that interaction finishes. Once they get home eventually, they tell this to their mother. Their mother is quite surprised about this. Is like, oh, really? Okay. And yeah, so, all three of the siblings train with each other for the next 10 months. And once they all eventually finish their middle school training for high school, all of them enroll at the prestigious hero school of Shiketsu High School. And Ishuka was confident that they could get in. And when all of them walk up to the entrance of the school, she says, we got this, you two. This is our journey. You're becoming the big three of Japan. As Rei's like, show off. As she pushes Ishuka. As Ishuka and them start arguing, and Sai's just like, why not we calm down? And yeah, as all three of them walk into UA. And as always, they do the exam, and it goes fine. So once one of the Shiketsu teachers is done explaining the rules of the exam, no one interrupts because we don't have a Tenya Ida here. Yeah. So Ishuka, being all prepared for what's going to happen, only to find out that her brother and sister, no, both of her sisters aren't even in her city. So she's a little downed by that because they had a very big plan for this. So Ishuka quickly is released to the entirety of the examinees are released into the field, and they quickly begin defeating some villain bots, as they were called. And Ishuka makes an ice sword out of her ice, obviously. And yeah, as she starts destroying some robots. And it's a pretty strong sword, as you'd imagine. And Ishuka quickly flies up into the air as she's surrounded by a massive bunch of 3-point villain bots. As she's like, freeze! As she blows ice down at the robots as they all quickly freeze. And she falls down to the ground and cuts them all in half. And yeah, it basically goes according to that for the rest of the exam. And she ends up getting a good amount of points. So, 4 weeks later, Ishuka gets a letter from the school notifying her and her 2 sisters that they had been let in to Shiketsu High School. No hologram because, this ain't UA. They can be a little simpler. So yeah, that's how that goes. And that's where I'll be leaving off, ladies and gentlemen. This is Otaku, signing off. Bye-bye. Comment, like, and comment more if you want a part 2 to this video. And comment your ships, by the way. So yeah. This is Otaku, signing off. Thank you if you've made it this far, and bye. Okay, guys, so the story continues right after Ishuka runs over to her sibling and says, everybody, I got into Shiketsu. How'd you 2 do? As Sai looks to her and says, well, I'm in, S1. As she's like, what do you mean S1? What letter? As he looks, oh. Sorry guys about that. My brother is kicking the phone. Anyway. Ishuka looks over to Sai and says, well, what is it? As Sai says, oh, one sec. As he says, S1A. And Ray says, oh, same. As Ishuka's like, oh, so we're all in the same class. That's interesting. As their mother comes in from the front door and says, how do you kids do on the exam? You better have done well. As they all say, we got in. And we got into the top class. As she's like, good job, you all. In a couple of years now, you'll be making money. As she walks by. And Ishuka just thinks, her again. As the next day, Ishuka and their siblings go over to UA. And when they get there, Ishuka, Rei, and Sai quickly go into the building and find one essay. And when they do find it eventually, they get it just barely before the bell. And the teacher yells at them and says, how are you 2 late? First day, geez, get into your seats quickly. As he starts explaining the lesson. And around 15 minutes go by, and the teacher says, well, it's time for, what's it called? Assembly. No, orientation. Orientation. As all the students quickly go to orientation, and since I have literally no idea how that would go, because we haven't seen Shiketsu orientation. Yeah, we'll be skipping that. But during the event, I'm going to say there were two people staring at Ishuka, and they liked her. I'll leave that for part 3, but I will let you guys know that I have thought about these ships, and one definitely won over the comments, and the other one is my personal ship. So yeah, guys, if you go back into the comments from part 1, you know who one person is. Not that hard to tell. And if you've been a member of the channel for a long time, you'll definitely know the other person. I talk about it a lot. So yeah, Ishuka waves at Todoroki and says, "Why were you staring at me?" As Todoroki, the two students that are in the ships, will say, are in Shiketsu, and we'll say they just underperformed enough there. And Endeavor ended up sending him to Shiketsu because he didn't want his son going to the school that All Might went to. And the other person got their second choice, obviously. They didn't go to UA. They didn't get accepted in this timeline. And yeah, I'll just reveal it now. It's Ochako. Uraka. Because it's canon, and you can't fight me on that. Anyway, Ishuka walks over to the two of them and says, "Hello," as Ochako quickly starts blushing and says, "Hello," as Todoroki says, "You're pretty," as Ishuka looks at him and says, "What?" As she quickly runs away blushing in like a tomato. Basically like Ochako. In the anime, obviously. And Ishuka goes to her sisters and says, I think a boy likes me," as they start teasing her on it. And after orientation, the day was over, obviously. And yeah, so physical exams never happened because we don't have Aizawa. And we'll say Shinso and some other kid. We'll say the mushroom girl because she's adorable. Yeah. And yeah, they go to 1A in UA high school. So in Shiketsu high school, then very next day, Ishuka gets into class, and the teacher says, "Okay, everybody, today we will be sharing a facility from UA, and we'll be taking a little field trip over there for some, what's it called? As it's like a fill in the blank thing. As one student says, rescue training. As he's like, correct. As a couple minutes pass by, and they go over to the bus and take a trip. As they start discussing quirks, they compare Ishuka's to a blissful ice bird. And she's like, "Oh, thank you." As Ochako and her start talking. And Todoroki also buds into the conversation. All three of them start talking to each other. And Ochako asks, "So have you ever been in a relationship before, Ishuka?" As Ishuka's like, "No, I haven't ever been." "Why?" As Ochako blushes like, no, nothing like that. And I was just wondering. I mean, there isn't much to talk about, really. As Todoroki says, yeah, no, I don't think any of us have. As Ishuka says, "So what are you two's quirks?" As Ochako says, "My name is Ochako Uraka, and my quirk is gravity. I can make stuff float, I can make myself float. And to release them from anti-gravity, I simply put both my hands together, finger by finger, and say, release. As Ishuka's like, yeah, and what's yours, Shota? As Sho says, my quirk's half and half fire, half ice. As Ishuka says, half fire? I haven't seen you use fire yet. I've only seen your ice. Can I see it? As Todoroki says, fine. But I don't like doing this a lot. I just want to let you know that. As Todoroki lets out fire next to them. As Ishuka's like, cool. As Ishuka looks to him and says, we're kind of like a duo. We both have ice. Except I guess I'm more powerful. As she, flaps her wings that unfold. As Ochaka's like, you have wings? As the entire class looks over at them. As Ishuka's like, yeah, I have wings. They're pretty cool. As Sai and Rei walk over and says, hey, you three, what are you doing? As Ishuka's like, oh, hi, Rei. Hi, Sai. And we were talking about our quirks. I was showing them my wings. I haven't gone onto the tail yet. Or the little crown, as I like to say. As Ochaka's like, a tail? As she reveals the little tail on her back. And it's not like a normal tail. It's kind of like strips of paper. But no, it's exactly like strips of paper. And she shows her the little crown on her head that comes out of her. And it's as you see in the picture, on top of Articuno's head. Anyway, they arrive at the USJ, Unforeseen Simulation Joint. And 13 starts explaining the rules to both Class 1A and 1SA. And when they're all listening, Bakugo gets a glance at Ishuku, and he just thinks, hate her. As he says that because, she was the popular one. And everyone was obviously huddled around her. She was the center. So Bakugo said, that's my competition. As when they get into the massive USJ, they all crowd onto the top of the stairs. And as 13 keeps explaining, Ishuku says, Miss 13, why is there villains down there? Or are those fakes? Sorry if I'm wrong. As 13 says, villains? Aizawa, was there a As Aizawa says, no, there was not. As both the Shiketsu teacher and the other teacher, Aizawa, get prepared. And they start going down to attack the villains that are pouring out of the portal. As Ishuku says, what? Villains? As she cups both of her hands to her mouth and sends massive ice shards down there towards the villains. And a couple of them actually hit the villains on their necks, paralyzing them for a temporary amount of time and putting them down. And yeah, that helped Aizawa and their teacher a little. But when Shigaraki arrived, not much change, except Aizawa doesn't get hurt by his elbow because the Shiketsu teacher is there. And Ishuku says, watch out, teacher, as the Shiketsu teacher is punched into the wall by the Nomu. And Aizawa is stomped onto the ground as the Nomu begins bashing his head in, as Shigaraki says, "I'm not the final boss. I'm merely the spokesperson," as the Nomu is built and designed to defeat All Might. You two heroes may be strong, but you are nothing compared to the Nomu and his destructive power. As Izuku says, everybody who has an ice quirk crowd around me, as a massive ice lightning bolt shaped figure appears, as Todoroki puts his hand on her shoulder and the ice begins forming, and it makes one massive lightning bolt of ice, and she says, "Tectonic smash," as one of the Shiketsu kids had an earthquake where they could basically bend the earth, and two boulders also put layers around the lightning bolt, and some kid also had a lightning quirk, so now it was like a lightning bolt, and it hurled towards the Nomu. And the Nomu jumped at it, caught it, and when it went to catch it, though, it got severely damaged, as it also pierced through the heart and the brain. As the Nomu looks up to them, unfazed, and takes it out of the vital organ and throws it back at them, as Izuku says, "Everybody, get behind me," as she makes a massive ice wall with the flap of her wing, and she says, "That was scary," as the Nomu comes through the ice, starting to beat up the students. Every student is one punched into the wall. And when it's Izuku, Todoroki, and Sai left, Izuku says, "We can do this. Sai, get Rei." As Rei, who's knocked out on the floor. And Sai says, "No can do, sis. We'll have to do a weekend stay." As she says, "Oh, that's fine." As they hug each other, but they start forming into one being. And they come out as a beast and start fighting the Nomu. But the Nomu immediately throws them into a wall and drop kicks the both of them straight up. And when they both hit the roof, smacking their head against it, they fall down, very concussed, as the Nomu then spikes them into the wall, both of them getting taken out of their fused form, knocked out indefinitely. As Todoroki then looks over and says, "Stupid beast," as he quickly freezes the Nomu, and thinking, "I think that was it," as he turns around to go check how his classmates are doing. And when the Nomu then breaks out of the ice and knees him in the back, nearly shattering his spine, as he immediately falls unconscious onto the ground. The Nomu walks outside because he smelled somebody, and that's when All Might is in front of him and says, "So you're the one." As they immediately start clashing outside of the USJ. And when All Might throws the Nomu back into the USJ forcefully, as he runs by to go combo the Nomu, he takes a glance at all the students who are knocked out, and he sees Todoroki bleeding out from the back. And he says, poor kid, as both the Nomu and All Might begin clashing. And eventually the fight ends with Shigaraki trying to help fight with the Nomu, but the Nomu being defeated, and All Might being saved by the other heroes who had arrived for backup. And yeah, that's where I'll be leaving off on part 2, everybody. Yeah, so our 2 ships are Ish Ocha and I'll say Ishu Roki. Yeah, okay. Because we'll say Ishuku is a top because yeah. Don't demonetize me, YouTube. You never heard that. Okay, this is Obito signing off. Bye-bye. Hello, everybody. I won't be wasting your time, so we'll get on to the video quickly. Okay, so we start the what if for part 3 on right after this USJ event. The very next day, after the students had some time to think about what had happened, discuss with their parents, Ishuga had no time because her parents weren't home. Her parent. So, Ishuga was still pretty sad because she kind of had a little depression because her mother hated all of them, basically. They just wanted them for money. Yeah, basically a Karen. Anyway, Ishuga came the next day and found out that in the next week they'd be having the what was it? The UA Sports Festival. So, yeah. We fast forward to next week when Ishuga and her 2 sisters meet up. And, as always, Bakugo takes the pledge because Ishuga denied the position because she didn't want to. And he does the same exact thing. So, Ishuga and her 2 sisters get ready to do the foot race because all the events are going to be the same exact thing. Ishuga immediately, with her 2 sisters in tandem, get their wings out, and when Midnight says to go, they both start flying as fast as they can across the arena. As Sai and Rei go along the track, Ishuga skips like the entire thing and flies to the exit. And when she gets to the final obstacle, which is the minefield, she's already passed it. So she just goes through the finish line, and everyone's surprised when it's like 2 seconds because Articuno is quite fast. Anyway, Ishuga says, that was easy. Anything else? Anyway, a couple hours later, well, no, about half an hour later, everyone had finished. And Ishuga now and her 2 sisters ended up getting first, second, and third. And Ishuga teamed up with the same people in Canon. And think of it as like Rei was on Bakugo's team, and Todoroki had Sai. And the results for that entire event are basically the same. Todoroki gets Sai's headband snatched by Tokiyama at the last second. So yeah. And basically the entire sports festival is the same after that. I'd say Todoroki would still win against Izuku and Bakugo against Todoroki, yeah. Anyway, yeah. Okay, that's 4 whole minutes. Anyway, so for internship arcs, they're skipped because Yushuga does not have anything whatsoever with Gran Torino, so she's not in that area. Rei goes with Todoroki, though, and they do end up saving Ida. So yeah, that goes out pretty well for them. And yeah. Okay, guys. Sorry for the long way. I'm deciding whether I keep going on. Anyway. The final exams happen, and Izuku and Ishuga and Bakugo end up winning. So, they get to the summer training camp park. It's the same people. Let's just simulate all the way to when the villains arrive. And when that happens, Ishuga and both of her sisters stick together. And they go and fight Muscular and win. And basically, the story's all together, except they beat everybody. So, Toga is actually pinned to a tree and defeated and captured. So, yeah. Bakugo, though, is still not stolen quickly enough. And Dabi ends up taking him. And the entirety of the All for One arc is the same. You can't really change that much. Unless you want Izuku to intervene, but I'm gonna say that does not happen. And yeah. Anyway. Oh, what happened after that? I forgot what happened after that. Oh, right. Final internships, like for season 4. Anyway, Ishuga and her sisters all chose Tsunade because they heard that he was quite strong in dealing with the overhaul investigation, and they were quite interested in that one. So when they joined, they all had to make him laugh, and they spent about 2 hours on this before Ishuga made him crack up a little. And he said, "Fine, you pass," as he stamped them. Because since there was 3, he didn't want to fight. And potentially risk getting his All Might merch ripped up. Anyway, Ishuga, eventually with, patrolling with her 3 sisters and, Mirio, ends up finding Eri as she clenches to, Ishuga's side, and, Rei's like, "Oh, who's there?" As Sai looks and says, "That's the guy we're looking for." As Overall Hit says, "Oh, sorry, heroes. My daughter can be quite troublesome. I apologize." As Ishuga pulls them back and says, "Oh, yeah, we're sorry." As she gestures to Eri to go back, but Eri ends up staying. Well, trying to stay at least with them, but seeing Overall about to pull his glove out, Izuku says, "Oh, Eri, you should really be going," as she nudges Eri closer, and they leave that. And as always, they tell Night-Eye about this. And the rest of the series goes the same, guys. I've been rushing this because I want to get on to other things, guys, so I'm sorry about that. Yeah, this is Clone Stories signing off. Bye-bye.